Hey, Thrive Loud fans, Lou Diamond here. You know, video continues to be such an integral part of marketing and messaging your business. And many entrepreneurs and small businesses are a bit uncertain, even confused, about how to best create and deploy videos for their websites, YouTube channels, and social media sites. If you fall into this category, I have one word for you: Animoto. Join the millions of businesses, photographers, and families who use the power of video to share what matters most to them. Whether it's marketing videos for your business, slideshow videos for photography, or even slideshow compilations of family pictures, anyone can make great videos with Animoto. If you've been a regular listener, you heard Animoto's co-founder, Jason Shao, on the program share his story and how his company is helping so many people incorporate video into their messaging. After that episode aired, we had listeners, former Thrive Loud guests, and even yours truly use Animoto to help create effective marketing videos. So head over to Animoto.com, click the Get Started button, and use the promo code THRIVELOUD to get an additional savings. That's Animoto, A-N-I-M-O-T-O. Make great videos easily.
A particle is essentially a set of relations that reach outward to connect with other things.
What are those other things, please?
They are interconnections of yet other things, which also turn out to be interconnections, and so on and so on. You see, in atomic physics, we never end up with any things at all. The essential nature of matter lies not in objects, but in interconnections.
Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond, and today on Thrive Loud, we have a technologist and coder by training, the consummate entrepreneur and a storyteller at heart. She is the CEO of BRAVA Investments and the author of newly released LEAPFROG, the new revolution for women entrepreneurs. She is committed to delivering returns to investors while making a catalytic impact on women in the world, and is probably one of the most inspiring people you will ever come across. Thrive Loud listeners, I bring you the Nathalie Molina Niño. Nathalie, how are you today?
Oh, thank you. That's a lovely, lovely intro. Ended with the most amazing part, which is that you got my name perfectly correct.
Well, I've had the good fortune for the Thrive Loud listeners of having to sit next to this lovely individual and be able to say her name often, because obviously it is a little tongue twistery, but it is a wonderful sounding name. And because she's a wonderful person, and we get to make you be the guest because she and I co-host a show, and this is an opportunity to focus on her as the star, if you would. And with that, I think it's really important. Thrive Loud is all about people who are thriving each and every day in their lives, their businesses, and their passions. And this is something that you live and breathe every minute of your life. Nathalie, if you could, let's let the Thrive Loud listeners get a feel for what you're about with a little bit of your journey and how you've gotten to where you've gotten to and continue to go to, because it's awesome. And we're going to have a fun conversation because we're just fun people in general. So you ready?
Well,
yeah.
That's just a requirement.
Yes, of course.
That's a given. Let me begin, I suppose, in the place that oftentimes, like anything, you kind of have full circle moments in your life. I grew up in the sweatshops of LA. Mm-hmm. And, child of immigrants. This is how my family made their way in the world, started working in sweatshops, and then eventually owned their own factories. And I opted to have my career be in my mind, opposite of that, right? So I ended up in the world of tech. I started my first startup at the age of 20 when I was still in school. And in my mind, just go as far away from manufacturing and factories and all of that, and then landed myself in probably one of the most male-dominated worlds, probably in that way pretty similar to manufacturing. And then, I often say, startups are like an addiction, right? It can be torture, and yet it can be sexy, and it's really hard to get out of it. And so that's what happened with me in startups. And I liked what I found. And next thing you know, I am, 4 ventures later, 15 years into my career in tech, grew my last venture, which was in collaboration with the time a publicly traded company called Lionbridge, to be, in 37 countries. We had built the largest private crowd in the world, think crowdsourcing, right? But behind sort of a wall. So that really important algorithmic work like the Google algorithm, Bing and Expedia and other algorithmic companies could benefit from crowdsourcing, but also benefit from a curated community. And that was 70,000 people in over 40 countries, actually. And I would say the biggest takeaway there is that you can imagine not just working at the pace of tech, but then amplify that across multiple countries around the world. I lived on an airplane, and I was pretty burnt out. So 15 years into that career, I left. And like my mother likes to say, it's like the Hotel California, you can check out, but you can never leave. And so in my mind, I was done. I was done with tech. I moved to the one place in the world where I feel the most relaxed and the most sort of in tune with myself. And that's Manhattan, which few people believe, but that the pace here is sort of my natural pace. And so sometimes being on the West Coast, which is where all of my companies have been, was a little stressful for me because I felt like the engine that was constantly propelling everyone forward. So in my mind, I came to New York to take a 2-year sabbatical and just leave tech, leave, my career, start over, reimagine myself. And I realized that I had been a storyteller all my life, even though I'm an engineer. I had the job of communicating really complex concepts, whether it was computational linguistics, machine learning. This is the sort of thing that it was my job to make available to the layman, multiply that across multiple languages, right? And so I thought, I'm in New York. I'm going to take a couple years off. Let me do that by focusing on the world of storytelling and learning this skill that I am moderately okay at and learning it from real storytellers. And I couldn't imagine better storytellers in the world than New York theater people. So the short version of this part of the story is just that I applied on a whim to Columbia's theater school. Somebody over there had a sense of humor and decided to let a techie into that world. And while I was there, I met one of the most inspiring women. She saved Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court in 1992. And she and I co-founded a Center for Women Entrepreneurs inside of Barnard College, which is a part of Columbia University. So I found myself learning about playwriting and the theater and truly storytelling. And at the same time, I co-founded a Center for Women Entrepreneurs. And I spent I spent a number of years, close to 5, just paying it forward, right? I was usually the only woman in the room. I was oftentimes the only Latina in the building in my career. And so I decided it was my time in life to pay it forward and help create other women entrepreneurs. And in the process of doing that, it occurred to me that women aren't lacking in education. They really aren't. More women are graduating from college than men. I mean, it just became super clear to me that what was holding women entrepreneurs back wasn't just a lack of exposure to mentorship and education. We'll never give up on the idea of education as a really important thing. But that isn't the number one critical factor holding women back. The number one thing holding women back is capital. Right. It's super simple. It's money. And so that's kind of where I ended up now. And that's why I am CEO and founder of my company, BRAVA.
So BRAVA right now, and maybe help paint a little picture of this, is you obviously act as an investment. And is there a specific theme or industry that you focus on? Or is it more helping women entrepreneurs specifically as what you work with? Because I think help the audience understand a little bit of how you think about how you invest.
Totally. My sense is that, well, first of all, in case you haven't figured it out by now, I'm a contrarian, and I'm also I'm an engineer. I love data, and I'm not going to do anything unless it's rooted in real data. And so I spent a lot of time researching the space. And what I saw was that I did research. Obviously, being in tech, I was exposed to venture capital and the world of investing my entire adult life. But I was about to go into the world of investing in women. right? And so what could I add to the table, right, that wasn't already there? What holes were there in the market? What were people doing in a way that I thought I could do better? And so I spent some time doing that research, and what I found was a few interesting things. One of them is that almost every fund that I saw was struggling to raise. And I scratched my head wondering why. And you can point to a lot of different things, but the one thing that they almost all had in common was that they were all women teams. And I thought, as much as I don't like it, and as much as I don't think it's fair, if all women entrepreneurs have a hard time getting funded, why would an all women fund manager team have any easier a time? Right? The numbers are bigger, the stakes are higher. And so I thought, as much as I may not want to believe this is true, how could it not impact them? Right. And so I thought, okay, point number one. Point number two is I looked and I saw that all of them had as a criteria that the companies that they invest in be led by women. And that was a little problematic to me because I thought, look, if the goal is to support women economically, and somebody comes to me and I'm faced with the choice of investing in, say, the next, I don't know, Tory Burch with some awesome fashion company. But the next meeting is a couple of dudes who have cured breast cancer. Come on, like if you really care about changing the state of women in the world and making measurable, real impact, I'm going to say that for me, anyway, it's a no-brainer. Invest in the cure for breast cancer, not in the next fashion company, even though they both might be exceptional investments. If the goal is to make impact, let's look beyond just the optics of who's in the corner office and let's look at who's really making an impact. And so that was the second observation that I made. And then the third observation that I made is that when I looked at the history of the last 15 years of this industry of investing in women, which has been small but growing, in the last study that Wharton did, there were 58 of us in the space. And so,
what I love about this, Nathalie, is that you have paired a whole bunch of things together from who you are and have made this into what you're doing. And I love the fact that, you're still putting on the very smart business hat in how you assess all the businesses that you choose to work with. And I think it's important because as it comes to it, the most successful businesses aren't just male dominated or women dominated. They have a blend of everybody. It doesn't matter who's running it. A lot of it though is about the purpose and the value of what it is. That example you gave about helping, to cure breast cancer versus, to create the latest trend in handbags. We want to make sure that we have the right balance in this world to do great things. And I think this is something that's embedded in you, which is great, is this sense of a good true north on all the important issues that are out there. Yet the ability to recognize the key steps of how to go about getting funding and do all that is so powerful that you're involved with it. What I want to hear about is, with these experiences that you had, is that what prompted you to put together the book LEAPFROG? Because I want to hear a little bit about the experiences that you've had and how that's led to this amazing time that we live in for all entrepreneurs, but specifically for female entrepreneurs. Can you give us the guide and how you came up with the idea for the book and how you then jumped into putting it all together?
Sure. So here's the thing. We all learn most and maybe remember most from the moments of tension, or that time someone embarrassed you and asked you some gotcha question, or, and for me, with the evolution of BRAVA, and as you said, like the true north of where, I'm not saying that my investment thesis is the end all be all only solution. I'm saying that there was a hole in the market and I'm filling it. And there's room for all of us, right? And all the different theses that are out there. But what I found when I said, look, I care about the impact that the companies make, and I don't give a rat's ass who the founders are. That's not true. Of course I care about who the leadership team. I want the leadership, who they are, right? The leadership team's got to be solid. They've got to be the same thing every other investor looks for in a leadership team. But some of the heat that I got, which, rightfully so, was, well, are you giving up on women entrepreneurs? And the answer was absolutely not. I have a personal bias towards them, and the data shows that they perform and all these other reasons, but it's not going to be a sort of barrier to entry. If somebody who has a really solid business model comes to me and they're not women-led, I want to look at them, right? And so when people ask me that question, part of what I said was, how can anybody accuse me of not caring about women entrepreneurs? I just came out of having launched and created a center for women entrepreneurs. Like, that's what I'm in the business of doing prior to creating BRAVA. You know what? Hang on one second.
No, it's okay. We want him as part of the show. Is it him or she? I don't even know
The dog?
what the dog is. It's a beautiful
It's a she.
dog. I've seen pictures of it. It's some form of husky. I've seen it. It's really good.
It's not. Oh no.
No, it's not a husky.
Chow.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm super insulted. She's gonna be super insulted. I won't tell her. It's all right.
Okay, don't tell her. Don't let her know that I got her breed wrong.
That's one of the key criterias with chow chows is they're kind of snooty and yeah, that's okay. One of their most endearing qualities. But yeah, I mean, when I started to think about that, it was like, okay, well, BRAVA's theory of change is a theory of change that is all about focusing on all women collectively and not focusing only on women in the corner office. It's how are we investing in companies that benefit all women, right? But then, the question is, well, what about those women who are ready right now? What about those women who are in the corner office and are struggling to get capital and are struggling to grow their businesses? We know that while women are starting businesses at twice the rate of men in the United States, they are over 90% below the $1 million a year revenue threshold. And so, yes, women are starting businesses all over the place, but they're getting stuck at this small stage. And so the question was, well, BRAVA is dealing with the larger ecosystem system change level, but what are we doing right now to deal with the women who today are struggling to get that Series A or struggling to get their business off the ground or to grow their business from less than $1 million to more? And in a way, that's what LEAPFROG is. It's the answer to that question. BRAVA attacks the problem from one side, and LEAPFROG attacks it from the other, which is these women who are on the front line right now with their businesses struggling to help them grow.
Yeah, and I think it's so smart because it's also uniquely positioned. One, you've lived it, having done it on the other side, so you have that experience and gone through with yourself. And I would imagine what a wonderful thing that would be for the businesses that you do help to take to that next level and work with. To be able to guide all the people that are there with the experience that you've had. What a mentor you must be, man or woman, whoever the companies that you invest with. But it's such a great thing to look at, and I give you credit for that because it's a challenge. I think we want to be able to find the right businesses that meet all the criteria and deal with this. I'm drawing a parallel here to something that you and I both deal with, and that is, we have interviewed people who are focused on businesses on sustainability, but how sustainable are their businesses? And we ask these questions to these guests. Mm-hmm. It's great. You have a great concept, but we still have to make sure the business makes sense. No different than what you're doing for the purpose of we're trying to advance women-owned businesses, women-focused businesses, products, but you're looking at it from the holistic point of view. Is it going to hit all those points? And really, in your heart, is to make sure that there's a great story in there and that it hits your true north and all the things that are there. So it's kind of cool. Do you look back at all these steps that you've done, and do you continue to realize how proud you must be of everything and the successes that are just continuing to come along with you? Because sometimes when you're on the ride, you're so busy doing all these things, you miss out on appreciating what's going on. Do you appreciate how impressive all of this is and how cool it is?
No. I'm sorry, but what would I be waking up excited to do if I was so self-satisfied with what I've done? No. Well, no.
But there's nothing wrong with.
Hold on. There's always more, right?
Yes. I was going to say that still doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that you should be proud and happy each day within it, because that's obviously what drives you. Obviously, it's never going to make you settle. I'm not saying you're going to stop. In fact, you have no off button. For the Thrive Out listeners out there, to actually get her in one location for more than like 6 hours is logistically amazing, because she's constantly dealing with so many different, whether from charitable causes to the BRAVA investment focuses to promoting the book that just came out. I mean, it's amazing that being able to sit still. Of course, you're not going to sit still, but I hope that you're smiling every now and then, because you do. You are a good selfie smiler. You have the art of holding the phone out and getting everybody in and, communicating it out.
There has to be joy in all of it, right? There has to be. And I think that especially, as I've gotten older and I've realized that, life is short and we're not all going to live forever. In fact, none of us are going to live forever, although I know some people are trying to fix that. But, it's really important. And things that didn't feature prominently in my early career, like I don't know how you feel about vulgarity, but
yeah, we're allowed. It's all allowed. We're allowed to be as vulgar as fucking possible.
All right. The no asshole rule was not real prominent in my list of priorities when I was 25. And, it is now. It's rule number 1, in fact. And so, there's joy, but I will say this. I probably am guilty of not stopping and appreciating sort of where I've come from enough. But my family is oftentimes a reminder of that. There are moments. I gave my first keynote last year in Ecuador, which is my home country, and I gave it in Spanish, which I've never done a formal business keynote entirely in Spanish. And that was my first time, and to have it happen in Ecuador and to have my dad be in the audience and all of these sort of moments. And it was for Planned Parenthood, who is an organization that I adore and that I'm partnered with. And to be talking about this issue of investing in women, and it was like on so many levels, it was this moment where I had to, the moment just presented itself, and I had to stop and pinch myself and think, this is pretty good. This is pretty good. This is what life's all about, right?
Nathalie, when I ask every Thrive Loud guest this question, and I'm very curious to hear the answer of this one, when you have trouble thriving, who do you turn to get back on the thriving track? More specifically, do you have a personal sensei that you seek out?
The answer is yes, I do. Okay. And what's funny is nobody knows about her. In fact, the only people who do are probably on my staff because they see her as a recurring meeting in my calendar. And the reality is I have multiple. And the one thing that they all have in common is that I look for people who are so radically different and in radically different industries that have absolutely nothing to do with what I do on a daily basis, that they can mirror to me a whole different perspective on life and on the goings on of my day to day. But my number one point person was somebody who I used to see. She's sort of a coach, therapist kind of person. I started seeing her back in 2009, and we got into the habit of just checking in, sometimes even twice a year, not with any frequency or regularity. But the day that I formed BRAVA Investments, it occurred to me that if I'm going to accomplish what I'm going to accomplish with this and the book and the various different projects that I had, I'm going to have to look at my performance the way that a professional athlete or an Olympic athlete looks at their performance. I have to be in top form, and that means physically, that means emotionally, mentally. And she worked with Steve Jobs in the last 6 months of his life. Oh. She is a Zen practitioner, and she's a coach, a therapist, and all of these different things. And when I formed BRAVA, I reached out to her and I said, from here on forward, I would like to meet with you on a weekly basis because you're a part of how I perform optimally. And I've been seeing her every week ever since.
And obviously that's awesome. And because those that recognize that are those that truly thrive. And I always say are the ones who truly thrive loudly, because they're the ones who recognize that you did. To be a top performer, you always got to be on your top of your game with everything. And that's powerful and not really surprising, because I'm just utterly impressed with you every time I hang out with you. So, which is obviously in very limited chunks, but very intense chunks when we're recording or just, trying to communicate with one another. So here's a question that I think Thrive Loud listeners, and we have a huge investment and entrepreneurial community. When you look at some of the investments that either you have looked at or within the investment community in this space, there are so many trends in different areas that pop up. A little over 2 years ago, everything was about cannabis, and that continues to grow. And obviously lots of different health areas. Certain trends that you're seeing more often than not, and we'd be curious to hear your thoughts on where you see, the entrepreneurial investment space leaning towards from your seat and your purview.
Sure. I mean, the two things that I see surfacing, and again, this is from my lens, right? Yeah. I have my very specific lens, but the two things that I think are surfacing for me, and I was actually just having a conversation with one of my business partners on this, are the question of climate change and how we go away from just the doom and gloom and, the seas are rising and everything else to actionable real world, like what can we do right now? And, Paul Hawkins wrote a book called Drawdown. And in that book, he does what I think is really what's needed in the space, which is he simplifies it. And he says, look, these are the 10 things that we can do to make an impact on climate change. They're real, actionable things that we can do today. The technology exists, the systems exist. Like, it's things that we can really move the dial with right away. And 2 of those 10 things, 1/5 of the things that this expert in the field determined, were critical, relate to gender. And one of them has to do with educating women and girls, and the other one has to do with reproductive health and, giving women autonomy over their bodies and everything else. And so to me, that's huge, right? That means that now I'm having to navigate these waters of not just gender lens investing because it's a good opportunity and because I know that we can get top quartile returns if we invest in this undervalued asset, which is to say women. But now I'm also starting to see this conversation surface around, well, and how is that inextricably connected to climate change? And so I would say that's the first thing that's huge for me right now. And then the second thing is the workforce development piece, right? People call it future of work. That's fine. But I'm also looking at organizations and industries that are incredibly arcane and that are ripe to be innovated on, right? If I look at restaurant workers, if I look at elder care professionals, if I look at domestic workers, it's more than just a sexy topic. You've got all of these activists in those space now who, went to the Oscars and the Golden Globes with famous actresses, and their causes, they're actually up on stage during the Oscars. Their causes are currently sort of top of mind, but I also see an economic opportunity there, right? I see that, I don't know, there's a single mom from Jamaica who owns 30 buildings in the Bronx, and those buildings and the infrastructure are dedicated to doing things like elder care and child care, but they deliver every single day 1,000 meals on wheels. And she's looking at how to turn that, economic development infrastructure and turning it into a for-profit business. If she has the infrastructure to deliver 1,000 meals a day, why not make it so that someone like me, who, faced with the choice of ordering from Grubhub or ordering from a company where, maybe, I'll get comparable food, but I know that a percentage of my, money is going to go towards feeding somebody who's needy. Like, it's the Tom's model, right? And that's the kind of thing that it's ultimately workforce development. How do we use that same workforce that's undervalued, underpaid in some ethical way to also make money? And so that whole play is super interesting to me because I think there's an appetite for it in the market, and there are systems in place already that it can be turned into really viable businesses.
I swear, every time I talk to you, I feel like I'm not doing enough for the world. This is why Nathalie rocks. I literally am like, oh my God, I got to be doing so much better things. I got to be eating better. I got to be thinking about what I'm buying better. Gosh darn you, Nathalie Molina Niño. Anyway, no. Yeah.
I have a friend who's an expert at all things health and wellness, and she calls me a muffin vegetarian. So people sometimes confuse my vegetarianism with healthy living, and I could probably do better on that front.
Nathalie, when your brain needs to relax, you need to kick back and do, you're not working. What's your relaxation go to, or the fun thing you love to do most when that isn't work related or or writing related or all the other many gazillion things you do?
Oh God. The fact that I'm struggling with that question is probably the answer to your question. I took 10 days off and went home to Ecuador, to my place there to edit my book. That's, I had spare time. It wasn't spare time, but it was time scheduled to unwind. And what I did was, edit my book. I mean, it's fun. I mean, this is the thing is I make it so that there is a fuzzy line between work and pleasure because I don't want to be doing work that I don't love. I mean, there's a hack in my book called Fuck Your Friends and Family Round. Like, I'm clearly having fun here, right? There's another one called Climb in Bed with Your Customer. I mean, these are the sorts of things that I'm writing. So it's kind of hard not to call it fun, right?
I'll say this. I now understand why we get along, mostly because when my brain goes into the relaxation mode, I'm adjusting the way I deliver my keynote or for a presentation, or we're coming up with new creative things that we do on the podcast. So I get it. It's fun that way, because then that you're doing what you love every day, which is, living your passion, which is why you're on the show, which is really cool. And that's why we're glad you have you. Nathalie
Molina. I do business with people who I consider my friends. I mean, many different ways, right? That life gets architected, I suppose.
All right. Let's talk about the little barking, being not too far away from you, because I know you have a special place. Tell us a little bit about the dog, because I'm swearing my life, we're going to have a Thrive Loud dogcast one day. Just bring on all the dogs of all of the amazing people that come on the show. Just give a little bit, and we'll put a show note picture of this ridiculously cute animal. So just give a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, well, her name is Leela, which is short for Leela Monster. She is a chow. She is my third chow. I will never have another dog ever. And I know you're not supposed to say never, but this one I'm solidly clear on. They are conceited, and they are independent, and they are not especially athletic, and they're extremely zen. And for all of those reasons, she is oftentimes very opposite to me, and it's that calming energy that I love to come home to.
Oh, that's awesome. Nathalie, give us all of the places, plugs, and things that we need to know about BRAVA, about your newly launched book, and anything else that's coming up and for you. Not in the not too distant here, almost end of summer, going into fall.
Yeah, absolutely. So BRAVA Investments can be found at bravainvestments.com and on the social channels at BRAVA Invests. And then LEAPFROG is at leapfroghacks.com, and same thing on the social channels, it's LEAPFROG Hacks. And it's 50 hacks for women entrepreneurs that are tired of the status quo.
And I look forward. We will make sure that all the show links go to the book and to BRAVA, so that everybody has a way to find it out and be able to connect to this rock star individual, who I have to ask this question because I'm dying to know where it goes. Nathalie, your all-time favorite movie?
It's called Mind Walk, and it was produced in the 80s. By one of the Chopras, and it's not going to sound sexy to you, but I promise you it is. 15-year-old Nathalie had her mind blown, and it's about systems thinking and chaos theory and complexity, and it's awesome.
I love it. And I got to tell you, I love when I get stumped on a movie that I don't know, and then I'm writing it down now so I can go check it out. I love it because it shows a uniqueness about you, and not surprisingly, it taps into a lot of the great things that you have. So that's awesome. On my to-do list, I will watch this. I will check it out.
And it's hard to find, so you're going to have to watch it on YouTube or something.
That's usually how I'm watching everything these days. At least it seems to be the only way to get to everywhere. Nathalie Molina Niño, truly a pleasure to have you on Thrive Loud. This has been more fun than you probably think it is, but for me, it's been a blast. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Awesome.
Of course. And to all the Thrive Loud listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.